Flame to the second piece of canvas, and as we can see, it's actually burning away now, and it looks as though it'll keep on burning until it's pretty much gone now. Whereas the first piece, which is the alum-treated one, it's almost extinguished completely. There's almost no further sort of degradation or burning has taken place since we removed the flame. So all in all, this is relatively an impressive demonstration of what was capable using this alum treatment.
The superiority of Roman siege engineering resulted in victory after victory. Within 4 years, Trajan destroyed a whole nation. He exterminated the Dacians and repopulated the empty land with Roman settlers and pensioned soldiers. It became known as Rome-ania, and it's still called Romania today. From the Roman siege to the contemporary battlefield, all military engineers faced the challenge of combining firepower and protection with mobility. The medieval equivalent was the knight.
This is a trained killer encased in armor, and he is a medieval tank and riding through the front lines of a battle line.
The plate armor of the medieval knight is often considered bulky and cumbersome.
There is a myth that knights were winched onto horses and lots of people were needed to assist them to their steed.
But new discoveries show that the armor of the medieval knight was more advanced and sophisticated than we thought. A training manual written in the 14th century offers intriguing evidence that the fully armored knight was in reality a highly mobile and agile assault weapon. The text is believed to have been written by an intrepid French knight called Boucicaut. He tells us that as part of their rigorous training, knights in full armor practiced leaping onto the backs of their horses, climbing walls, and even performing backflips.
When you put a suit of armour on, it can be quite restrictive for the first time. It's very heavy, and as soon as that helmet comes down, it's very claustrophobic, and if you're not used to it, it's very, very daunting at first. So knights used to train religiously in order to get, used to it before they went out on the battlefield.
The secret of how the plated body armour allowed knights such freedom of movement was articulation.
Articulated armour is steel armour that joined together with rivets to enable the wearer to be encased in armour, yet still move freely. It's very important that the plates are very close together. Full movement can be maintained during combat without failing.
The metal joints and rivets in full plate armour mirror the joints in our bodies, so that they move smoothly with the actions of the knight as he moves.
Actually, wearing the full plate armour, you are still very agile, and you can still do pretty much anything any normal man can do.
Expert horseman Carl Ude Martinez is preparing for the ultimate demonstration of the knight's agility, the joust.
On a joust, you need to be able to really move quite well. You've got to be able to control your horse. But not only are you holding the reins in your left hand, you've also got a 12-foot lance in your right hand.
A full suit of plate armour worn by soldiers in the 14th and 15th centuries weighed on average about 60 pounds. This is lighter than that which a typical soldier carries into battle today. For the joust, this light military combat suit was often reinforced with heavier, bolted-on protective plates.
Your midriff is protected by the biggest part, the chest and the back. That joins together with a strap. Then the cuirass is this bit here, the lathe bit, which enables you to sit in the saddle and is very articulate. That protects from your waist down, basically, and the tops of your thighs. And then I have leg armour on the bottom. As we move up to the top here, as you can see, my shoulder and my elbow protection is in two parts, enabling me to move my arm around. If it was in one part, I'd find it very hard to move this left arm.
The most minutely articulated parts of the armour were the gauntlets or gloves. Each gauntlet might contain hundreds of rivets and up to 60 articulated separate tiny pieces.
These gauntlets that I'm wearing here is probably a very good example of how articulated the armour had to be. You can see that there's several layers to this. It's not just all one rigid piece. Fingers had to be very mobile in order to clutch hold of weapons, swords, reins. You can see there's about 10 lathes there, and you can see I can move these very, very easily.
The skills of war were also those of the joust. Mounted knights like Boucicaut, who was renowned as a master of the sporting tournament, charged at their opponents, thrusting before them a 12-foot lance. It could kill or disable with one blow.
Judgment time, I guess. I'm going to be galloping at 15, 20 miles an hour in a straight line with a 12-foot pole. Somebody else is going to be doing exactly the same. So we're going to collide at 30 to 40 miles an hour. The impact is going to be strong. Now it's time to put my trust in the armour that the knights wore from the medieval era.
The medieval lance was 12 to 14 feet in length. It was made of wood, usually ash or oak, and had a sharp metal tip made of iron or steel. Its origins are as old as military horsemanship itself. It began as a heavy spear designed to kill enemy horses and their riders. But for sporting tournament jousts, the head of the lance was fitted with a crown-shaped metal cap instead of the lethal point. The purpose of this was to allow the lance to catch onto the shield, making it easier to unhorse the opponent or break a lance on him, actions that scored highly under tournament rules.
I can move at quite fast speeds in this armour. You know, you really forget about it, and your main focus is on the target coming towards you. I'm able to move my body, take my lance across, and I'm able to get my shield out. So I'm actually very mobile in the saddle.
The combination of the protection afforded by fully articulated body armour with weapons like the lance, together with the speed of the horse, turned the knight into a formidable attack weapon on the battlefield. Used against foot soldiers in open combat, the knight in full armour reigned supreme for several hundred years.
By the end of the 15th century, the armourers had cracked it completely. They could make beautifully articulated armour of steel plate, fully hardened and quenched, of the very finest imaginable quality. And if you could afford it, you could be safe on the battlefield from all the weapon systems that were around.
The armour plate was so beautifully articulated that when NASA began to research the hard-shell spacesuit for the first moon landings, they looked to the 15th century armourers for their inspiration. Although armour plate did not go into space and astronauts found other more advanced materials, the story of plate armour is not over. In recent years, patents have been filed in the United States, and the American Department of Defense is once again investigating articulated Kevlar armour, although the results are still top secret. As with every successful military innovation, articulated armour's supremacy on the battlefield was eventually challenged by a new technology, the gun. But as we will see, the armourer's response was ingenious. The medieval world's answer to the gun was bulletproof armour. New X-ray photographs will solve the mystery of how ancient engineers created this life-saving military gear. Amazingly, they reveal that the technique is identical to that used on a modern tank. Today's armoured fighting vehicles are protected by duplex armour, in which two layers of metal combine to absorb or fragment the impact of projectiles.
In front of me I have two slabs of armour, which improve the ballistic protection from incoming projectiles. As time moved on, we discovered using heavier and heavier slabs of armour would just take away the effectiveness of the vehicle itself, making it slower, harder to handle, less effective generally. So we started to use composite armours made up of several different layers of different materials, air gaps, or materials such as glass or ceramics, because essentially they're lighter.
But duplex armour is a much older concept, one that in fact dates back over 300 years. In England in the 17th century, an arms race decided the fate of the monarchy. A war was fought between the royalists, who supported the king, and the parliamentarians, who supported a republic or commonwealth. The English Civil War left 850,000 dead in battle. In the main, the high death toll resulted from two deadly weapons, the crossbow and the gun. The standard issue gun from the 15th to the 19th century was the musket.
Guns have been around on the battlefield since the middle of the 14th century. Simple smoothbore muzzle-loading matchlock guns, which could nonetheless blow a lead bullet through the middle of any armour that any armourer could make.
But towards the end of the Civil War, armourers came up with something that reduced the effectiveness of both gun and crossbow: bulletproof armour.
The armourer's art has evolved over hundreds of years, and every time a weapon is developed to penetrate armour, it's the armourer's job to defeat that and create something that will stop penetration.
Earlier attempts at making bulletproof armour struggled to get the right balance between protection and mobility.
Armourers could make bulletproof armour, but nobody wanted to wear it. It was getting heavier and heavier, and they were constantly seeking ways of getting round the problem of the weight.
Ancient Discoveries investigates how the armourers of the English Civil War unlocked the secrets of lightweight, bulletproof armour. It's a journey that begins with a set of discoveries at the Royal Armouries in Leeds. While X-raying a number of breastplates made in the 1650s, researchers uncovered intriguing evidence that the armourers were experimenting with technology that was far ahead of its time. They were using duplex armour.
Well, one of our most exciting recent discoveries has been these duplex breastplates.
And they're clearly an experiment that was going on in the middle of the 17th century to make lighter bulletproof armour by doing multiple layers of metal in a single piece.
But the X-ray revealed an entirely unexpected feature.
We can see here the outline of the two breastplates crimped together around the edges. But also, internally to this, we have a third piece of armour.
This third layer was unknown before these X-rays were taken.
And this is actually part of a pikeman's leg arm. It's what's known as a tasset. We can still see the rivet holes in there that help us to identify its function.
The breastplate is reinforced by leg armour, astonishing proof that English armourers were using triplex systems. But because of the lack of ballistic data from the period, the true effectiveness of duplex and triplex armour against 17th century firearms remains unknown.
We have no ballistic data about shooting bullets at these things because the problem is that we don't really want to shoot bullets at historical objects and destroy them. And I suspect the manufacture of replicas and testing of those, as close as we can to the real thing, might be the best way forwards.
Martin Bavin, a replica armourer, is doing exactly that. Using the same tools and materials that were available to English Civil War armourers, he is recreating the tank-like armour system.
The armour that we're recreating, I would say, bears a lot of resemblance to the modern armour used on tanks today. It's obviously evolved a long way and they're using much finer materials, but in principle, the techniques and the idea is the same.
To counter the increasing power of firearms, armourers sought ways to make metals stronger. The repeated heating, hammering and cooling of ferrous metals like iron changes the crystalline chemical structure into a much smoother one. This renders the metal harder, tougher and more flexible. The process is known as tempering.
We've got here the inner layer, the central layer, replicating the pikeman's tasset that we can see on the X-ray, and then finally the outer layer.
The final piece weighs 10 pounds. It's 17 inches high and 13 inches wide, very similar to the Leeds breastplate.
We've built this armour as closely as we can to the original from the illustrations and the X-rays. Weight-wise, I think we've got it around the same kind of weight, so hopefully the metal is thick enough.
The armour has been brought to a ballistic testing facility at Cranfield University in Bedfordshire, where it will be tested against the firepower of a musket and a crossbow.
This crossbow is actually a goat's foot lever crossbow. To load the crossbow, you need to put the goat's foot lever on the top. The crossbow is now cocked and ready to fire. And you place the bolt on the crossbow, and away to go.
The goat's foot device uses a lever which enables the warrior to draw a more powerful bow, double the power of many ordinary bows, up to 350 pounds of draw strength. But even this enhanced super